You're very welcome back, and congratulations, you've got through the toughest part of the design thinking program with the distill phase. Now we're into Ideate, and Ideate is where we can have a little bit of fun. What Ideate is about is taking those customer insights that you generated in the distill phase and coming up with as many ideas as we possibly can to solve them. There's a quote that's attributed to Einstein that says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And what we're going to try to make sure happens in the Ideate stage is that we're not doing the same thing over and over again, that we're looking at these customer insights in new and interesting ways to allow us to develop some ideas to solve them. The problem is, without ideation, we come up with the same old ideas that we've always had. So what we're trying to do here, why we ideate, is to create new and different ideas. Ideas that are relevant, that are value-adding, and most importantly, are actionable. Ideas that we can do something with. What we're trying to do here, as we mentioned in the introduction to this course, is reconnect you a little bit with your creativity. We're trying to generate fresh new ideas for solving the opportunity that we have. How we do ideation is important. Creative thinking, or ideation itself, requires incubation, which we'll come back to in just a moment, inspiration or some kind of a stimulus, and diverse minds to spark results. It's always interesting to me, this diverse minds piece. I once did a piece of work for a human resources team where we were using design thinking. And I asked them to bring as many diverse minds to the workshop as possible. And people showed up, and there were male and female people of all races and creeds and so on. And I said, so where are these people from? And they went, they're from the human resources team. And I was like, but we want diverse minds. Oh, well, we've got a diversity of people. Yes, but they're all from human resources, which means they're all going to come up with ideas that are constrained by the human resources view. I wanted IT people and finance people and marketing people, etc. So that diversity of mind is really important. But before we go any further, I want to talk a little bit about incubate, the idea of incubating an idea in your mind. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to allow time for insights and ideas to churn around below the threshold of consciousness. We want your brain to be trying to solve this problem when it's in standby mode. So what we're trying to realize here is that incubation time leads to eurekas. It's when our brain is not front of mind thinking about these issues that we come up with some of our best ideas. So there are 3 steps to incubating around a problem. The first is to have a firm understanding of what that problem is, to really get it solid in your mind. The second is to prime your brain and to try to get it ready for incubation. And the third is to get into an incubate state. So as a little bit of practice for priming your brain, you've all got an understanding of what the opportunity is that you've got to solve, but as a little bit of practice for priming your brain, what I want you to do is have a quick look around the room that you're in right now and make a mental note of some of the things that you see. Now what I want you to do is choose one of these 4 colors: red, blue, green, or yellow. Now look around the same room, but this time, see if you notice anything different. I can pretty much guarantee that if you picked red, you noticed all of the red things in the room. If you picked green, you noticed all of the green things in the room, and so on. You noticed different things the second time round when your brain was primed with that particular color. And that's what we're trying to do, is just prime our brains for an incubate state. That word state is important as well. How you are at any given moment, how you're feeling at any given moment is your state. Now, we have strange ways of describing this state. We might say, my heart started racing, or I had a feeling in the pit of my stomach. And interestingly enough, our heart didn't actually start racing. It's just the way we use to describe excitement. You know, we didn't actually have a feeling in the pit of our stomach unless we had a large breakfast that morning. It's more around us saying, oh, I've got a little bit of dread around this idea. So we're trying to communicate emotions, and that's difficult for us to do. Yeah. So we need to realize that creativity is not just about what you do, but it's about how you do it, what state you're in while you're doing it. We can look at this from the perspective of brain waves as well. So beta brain waves are when you're awake and focused, and that's your usual and dominant state. Alpha state is when you're in deep relaxation. You're relaxed but still alert. Theta state is subconscious, so you're dreaming or you're in deep meditation. And finally, you've got delta state, where you're in deep sleep. What we're trying to do here is get you out of beta state, out of that dominant state and into alpha, where you're deeply relaxed but still alert. Because it's in that alpha state that your brainwaves are most susceptible to coming up with the best ideas that you've had to solve a problem. So we've got a few tips for getting you into the alpha state. The first one of those is time and space. Now, most of you will be aware of the fact that you're either a morning person or you're a night owl. You might do your best work, at 5 o'clock in the morning, or you might do your best work at 10 o'clock at night. We already understand that there's a time that suits us better to be creative. And some of us will also have a space that suits us to be creative. If you're aware of that, it's a good idea when you're trying to have ideas to get into that space at that time and boost your creativity that way. The second is to be your true self. I'm an introvert, and standing in front of a group of people facilitating workshops seems like a horrible job for an introvert, and at times it can be. But one of the things that is interesting is when I go home after a day's working in a workshop where I'm connecting with lots of people, which is a drain for me as an introvert, my wife can tell straight away. She's like, you were training today, weren't you? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, here's a glass of wine, I'll leave you alone. And she just gets out of the way. She knows I've been on transmit all day, and I just want to be by myself and be alone for a while. So I can be my true self, and that's a good time for me to come up with ideas as well. But whatever it is that you hold back when you're not in your preferred environment, let that go when you're being creative. Semi-automatic activities. Some of us have things that we do like taking the dog for a walk, going for a run, chopping vegetables, washing dishes, where it doesn't take up our entire brain space in order to work that out. It's not hard to go for a run, one foot in front of the other. It's not hard to chop a carrot. We can usually do that without expending a huge amount of mental effort on it. The important thing is that extra brain space gives the challenges that we're working on an opportunity to churn around in our heads below that conscious level of thought. And that can be when we come up with some wonderful ideas also. We also advise that if you can, you get into an inspiring environment. And obviously what's inspiring can be different for different people. But if there's a place that you know of that's really inspiring for you, perhaps you can go there and try to have ideas. So I often mix inspiring environments with the last one that we spoke about, semi-automatic activities. I go up into the Blue Mountains and I go fishing. Yeah. The Blue Mountains is beautiful, inspiring environment. Fishing is a semi-automatic activity. I've been doing it since I was 2 years old, so I can do it without thinking about it. And those two together often give me an opportunity to have a better idea than I would if I were sitting in my office at home. Morning diaries is something we can also use. So this was an idea of Julia Cameron's. And basically what she said was we should keep a diary by our bed, a pen and paper by our bed, so that the first thing that we do when we wake up in the morning is we start to write, almost in a stream of consciousness fashion. And the idea is that before the stresses of the day get in on top of us, we have an opportunity to get some thoughts down on paper that aren't colored by that day. And finally, we've got artist dates, again, an idea from Julia Cameron. And the idea here is that we can take ourselves into another type of inspiring environment, a place where we're looking at an art that's very different from what we're trying to think about in order to try to get a little bit of inspiration from it. Dave Grohl, the lead singer of the Foo Fighters, used to do this quite regularly, where he would go and visit other forms of entertainment and see what he could use to incorporate into the rock show that the Foo Fighters would put on. Once we've incubated on our chosen customer insight, we're going to end up with ideas running around in our heads. Some of those will come to the fore, some of them won't, until we get involved in actually doing a sprint, getting those ideas out onto paper. So we're going to talk a little bit about the idea sprints now and how we can use those customer insight statements and also the incubation time that we've had to generate ideas and work with them. There's 4 processes that we're going to go through here. Mind maps, crazy eights, a brainstorm, and creative exercises. Before we get into that, however, there's an important thing that we need to look at, which is the difference between a thought and an idea. Yeah? A thought isn't really going to help us to solve the problem, whereas the idea will. So ideas are thoughts that you can do. For example, I like the park is a thought. Yeah? Whereas an idea is, let's have a picnic in the park. It's an idea that you can do. I like the park, therefore I think we should do something in the park, let's have a picnic. So it's a subtle difference, but an important one. We want to come up with ideas rather than thoughts. So how do we capture these ideas? Well, what we try to do is make sure that we've got one per sticky note, per post-it note. Yeah? We want you to try to include a sketch where you can, because that will light up a more creative part of your brain, and that can help with generating ideas in yourself and in other people. We want you to give it a name or a heading, and we want you to write it as it's an X that does Y. So a couple of examples. An on-demand ride or something similar to Uber. Yeah? It's a location-based app that makes hiring an on-demand car easier to do. And we can put a little drawing of the phone in that allows us to use that app to select that ride. We could use We Fit as an example. It's an interactive digital game that turns exercise into fun for the whole family. And we could draw a picture of a television with the Wii beside it so that we can get a visual understanding of what it's about. We can also use mind maps, and I'm sure that you're familiar with mind maps, but basically what we're trying to do here is to create a mind map of all of your ideas. There's an example on the slide. All of the ideas that are in your head, mix them with old ideas, with new ideas, and what we're trying to do is loosely organize them on paper, because this is going to become your cheat sheet for when you're brainstorming. We can also use a thing called Crazy Eights. Now there's a number of ways that you can do this. You can do it with sticky notes and Sharpies. You can do it with a piece of paper folded 3 times, so you end up with 8 panels on it. But basically what we want you to do is put yourself under some time pressure. We want to give you 5 minutes total to sketch 8 ideas. 1 on each sticky note or 1 on each panel of the paper. 40 seconds per sketch sounds a bit crazy, but we're actually trying to put you under time pressure on purpose. We want you to turn off your self-editing and just get your ideas down on paper and see what happens. If at any point you get stuck, we want you to try to make some sort of an iteration to an earlier sketch so that you can explore it a little bit further. I'm going to show you a little video now that gives you a demonstration of how we brainstorm and some of the things that you might want to bear in mind as we go through that process. Okay, we're going to do a little brainstorm, and the topic for today is what, Nathan?
So today we're brainstorming new ideas to improve the cafe experience.
Okay, so in the spirit of brainstorming, we're going to go for quantity. We'll do a quick sketch on this size post-it note or whatever.
Fantastic.
What's your first idea?
So I've got quiet booths, so it's a quiet space for work.
Just building on that, I came up with an idea while I was mind mapping earlier about what if we had a cone of silence that just dropped down over some of the chairs in the cafe.
I like that. So thinking about the security of, you've got your laptops and all that out, and then you're going up to get a coffee. In cat burglar movies, and there's all the laser alarms.
So nobody's going to steal your stuff. Excellent, I like that idea. I came up with one for the coffee snobs, which was what if the process was on display, so that they could see everything from where the beans came from to them being ground to the coffee being made, etc.
Building on that one, what if you could select your own beans?
It's awesome, yeah. What if they had courses where the barista actually taught you how to make the perfect cup of coffee?
What if you had Jump the Queue? So it's an app where you order ahead.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You could have drone delivery, so you don't even have to go to the cafe.
Oh, wow.
So it delivers to your office or home.
What about, you mentioned the bike riding thing. What about if we could bring people in that manufactured bike accessories or things like that and get them to do demos in the cafe?
What if you actually had a bike mechanic there who could do the quick tune-ups,
Right, okay.
Change a flat tyre.
Yeah, great.
So a bike workshop or something.
That's fantastic. On that idea, I thought about customizing mugs, and I thought about what if we had a heat-activated texter style thing where you could write on the mug, so when the coffee was poured into it, the name of the person appeared on the mug itself.
You could have design your own mugs.
Absolutely, yeah. What about an edible takeaway mug? You could eat the mug once you were done with drinking the coffee.
So kids designing their own mug?
Sure.
Fantastic.
So that's pretty good. 17 ideas, yeah. Not bad. Thanks, Nathan.
Woo!
What you would have noticed with video, and what you've perhaps noticed from brainstorms that you've done in the past, is that creativity has diminishing returns. There's a little pause at the start until somebody comes up with our first idea. And as soon as we get that first idea, we get a massive spike of ideas. They come thick and fast until we get to a peak, usually about 10 minutes in, and then the ideas start to drop off over time, and we end up in a position where they're fading out as we get towards the end. And that's to be expected. What we'll show you is a couple of creative exercises a little earlier or a little later that can get you to a point where you can boost up that amount of ideas again. So where you can get stimulus from, where you can get new ideas from, are prior experiences, new experiences, or creative exercises. So I want to talk to you a little bit about creative exercises because there are thousands of them that are available to you. But you can boil them down to about three, or they fall into three distinct categories at least. The first is random connections, the second is best in world, and the third is break the rules. So as an example of random connections, I want you to think about Velcro. We're all familiar with Velcro. It's basically a type of reusable adhesive, if you like. The person who invented Velcro was walking his dog through some woodland near his home. And he noticed that when he got back, the dog was covered in little burrs, little seeds that had attached themselves to the dog's hair. And what he noticed as he was taking these out of the dog was that there was a hook and a loop. The loop was on the dog's hair, the hook was on the seed, and they were catching together. And he thought to himself, if I could miniaturize that hook and loop system in some way, I could come up with a way of having an adhesive that would be reusable. And Velcro was born. Now, what does Velcro have to do with walking dogs through the park? Nothing. But he had primed his brain with a problem, and nature supplied a solution in this case. If we take an example of best in world, and Nathan loves this one, given that he's from New Zealand. But if you are familiar with America's Cup or yacht racing, you'll notice that the New Zealand America's Cup team recently have been winning and winning and winning. And the reason that they have is quite simple. If you've ever seen an America's Cup yacht, you'll know that there are people on the grinders where they have to work really hard with their arms in order to trim sails and raise and lower sails and so on. And what the New Zealand team realized was that using your arms is not the most efficient way to do this. Your arms are not as strong as your legs are. So what if we could have people that were pedaling these grinders rather than using their hands? So what they did was they put a whole heap of bikes onto the yacht that people could pedal, and they hired a bunch of cyclists, people who had very little sailing experience, but they had solved the problem very, very well of how to get human effort into a crank efficiently. So the cyclists came aboard, the bikes were built into the boat rather than grinders, and New Zealand did very, very well in sailing. As a final example, break the rules, we've got Airbnb as a good example of that, I think. If we had told you 10 years ago that the biggest accommodation company in the world wouldn't own a single hotel or property, we would have all thought that was a mad proposition. But Airbnb broke the rules and said we don't actually need to own hotels or accommodation of any description in order to offer an accommodation service. How we offer the service might be more important than the service itself. There are a number of ways or a number of steps that we need to take in order to do this. If we take best in world to begin with, the question we're asking ourselves is who else in the world solves this challenge really well? You can think about sports teams or other organizations or brands or products or people. Then you want to move from who that group or that person is to the principles that they employ. How do they solve this challenge? What are the principles that they use? And then we move into ideas. Can you borrow from those principles to solve your own challenge? So as another example, we want to have a look at reinventing stick deodorant. And this is something Unilever did not so long ago. What they were looking at was who's the best in the world at applying substances to a surface. And they came up with, well, it could be a paintbrush or a paint roller or a knife or a pen. These are all good ways of applying a substance to a surface. So they looked at the pen and they said, well, what's the principle that the pen uses in order to apply a liquid to a surface? And they realized that it was the ball in the ballpoint pen that was important. So they took from that idea, if we could make that ball bigger and use it to apply deodorant rather than ink, that would work. That would leave us in a position where we would have something better than the stick deodorants we have now. And roll-on deodorant was invented by Unilever simply by looking at the best in world and the principles that they used. As an example of break the rules, let's look at disrupting the taxi experience. The first thing we've got to ask ourselves are, what are all of the rules, the norms, the status quo to this challenge? Then we ask ourselves, how can we challenge these rules, reverse them, oppose them, exaggerate them? And then we move into ideas. How can we borrow from those revolutions to solve our own challenge? So the rules with the taxi experience were that you book 15 minutes in advance and you wait outside for a pickup and you can pay by card or cash. And when you arrive, sometimes the card machine doesn't always work and so on. So the revolutions were, well, what if we took those and changed them? What if we could book any time? What if you were notified about the arrival? What if you could pay seamlessly, digitally? And what if it was hassle-free, that the card machine always worked? And what we came up with was you can book a taxi through an app. You get an ETA tracking on your device. You can use cardless digital payments. You've got shorter wait and drop-off times. And Uber was born. So we've had a look at some of the different ways that we can brainstorm ideas. And we'll have generated a huge amount of ideas to solve our problem. The question then becomes, how do we narrow down those ideas? How do we start to pick the ones that might work for us? We need to realize that harvesting those ideas is a critical part of the process. Sometimes what we do is we make a mistake. We take all of the creative and wild and okay and undeveloped or underdeveloped ideas from our brainstorm and we look at them from a feasibility and viability perspective. We jump too quickly to, can we build it and can we make money out of it? And what happens then is we end up with the usual. We have familiar results, we have incremental results. There are no real game changers in there. So what we want to do instead is we want to select them for potential. We want to look at these ideas and go, this is not about can we do it, it's about if we did it, would it matter? And once we've selected an idea for potential, we can move on to developing those ideas for feasibility, and we can do that through experimentation, through prototyping, through testing, and learning from those tests, reprototyping, testing, learning, and so on, until we've got an idea that's been developed for feasibility. So we ask you to use 3 selection criteria. The first is most likely to meet the need. We're going to ask you to vote on the ideas that you've come up with. We're going to ask you to place red dots beside the ideas that you think are most likely to meet the need of your how might we question. The yellow dots are going to be most likely to delight. We want you to place 1 vote on the ideas that you think would delight your users, and importantly, without regard for practical constraints. And finally, we want you to place green dots beside the ideas that you think are most breakthrough. So I want you to place a vote on the ideas that you think are most breakthrough, even if it's got a fatal flaw or some sort of real-world constraint that makes it impossible at the moment. Once we've done that, once we've selected our ideas, then what we want to do is start to flesh those ideas out a little bit. And the best way that we can do that, or the best way that Nathan and I have found that we can do that, is by using an idea canvas. So we've selected a couple of ideas that we think have the legs to solve the problem that we've got, or at least start with that. And what we want to do then is flesh those ideas out using an idea canvas. There's a number of reasons that we use this idea canvas. The first one is that it's a common framework. So we can use this for all of the ideas that we have. And it provides a structured template for fleshing out what those top ideas are. It adds a little bit of rigor as well. So it helps you to transition from a fledgling idea into an idea that's got a little more rigor built into it. It's a brief for the next phase of the process. So the idea canvas helps as a design brief for fleshing out your concept and prototyping it. And it's a point of reference for you to come back to during the experimentation phase later on. So you'll notice that the idea canvas has a very simple approach to it. It's only 6 sections. The first one is the customer insight, which talks through the customer, the need, and the insight, just like we spoke about in the distill phase. Then we look into the idea itself. What's your solution to that customer idea? It's an X that does Y, as we spoke about in the ideate phase. Then we move into the benefits. What are the top 3 benefits to the customer and the top 3 benefits to the company if you were using this idea? What is the value proposition then? The one reason why people should buy your solution? How is it different from the competition or from what's already in the marketplace? And finally, what are the riskiest assumptions? What are the assumptions that we need to test first? So, as an example, you can see here the idea canvas for Uber or for a similar type of app. So the customer insight is, we can't book taxis for a guaranteed time. The waiting times are a little bit ridiculous. Sometimes we've got a slow payment on arrival at the destination. That's what we've found out from our customer empathy work. Then we come up with the idea. So the idea we've come up with is a location-based app that makes hiring an on-demand private driver easy, convenient, inexpensive, and safe. It's got location-based app, it's got tracking, it's got easy payment, etc. The benefits to the customers and to the business are that it's got on-demand availability, certainty, we'll get a ride for sure, ETA, you can track the car as it's arriving, shorter wait times, cashless ride, etc. The value proposition, the one key reason customers should buy it, is it's an on-demand ride of your choice. The differentiator is that we've got on-demand availability, the certainty, the ETA that we spoke about earlier, the shorter wait time, and the cashless ride. That's very different from the taxi industry that it's replacing. And our riskiest assumptions are that people would ride with strangers, or that people would want to drive random people in their private car. Those were the key risky assumptions that organizations like Uber had to get over when they were building these apps to begin with. So, before the next workshop, what we want you to do is spend some time incubating on your 2 customer insights. We want you to write them down and prime your mind with them. Read them over a couple of times, put them somewhere memorable, like on the fridge or on your phone. And then we want you to choose at least 1 incubation activity per customer insight, and we want you to do that between now and the next session. What we want you to also do is create a mind map for each of the customer insights that you've got. We want you to brainstorm all of your ideas and thoughts, and we want you to make sure that you bring that mind map to the next workshop. That's very, very important because it leaves us in a position where we can use that mind map as a springboard to help you get straight into brainstorming when we do the live workshop. So that's the end of the ideate phase. Thank you.